seeing any green shoots at all in the private capital?
All right, well, that's the word coming in from AM Naik. We'll cut back to that in a bit. For now, some breaking news coming through. The president has released the portfolio details for the new cabinet. Remember, this time around, the two big recusals that have happened. Okay, we have flashed. Amit Shah has been appointed as the home minister. All right, there was a lot of speculation that he would be appointed as finance minister this time around. All of that has been quashed. Amit Shah, Home Minister. Nirmala Sitharaman has been appointed as the Finance Minister. So that may come as a surprise to the street for sure. Amit Shah, Home Minister, Nirmala Sitharaman, Finance Minister.
And I think Raj Nath Singh has been given defense, so we'll just wait for that as well. But this has come in as a surprise, Shireen. You know, we were expecting Raj Nath Singh to continue to be the Home Minister. The Finance Minister portfolio would go to Amit Shah. What is your initial reading?
Well, you know, as I've been pointing out, that this was the speculation and the buzz, but the fact that it's taken this long for them to actually be able to put out the names clearly seems to suggest that the indication was that there were changes that were being worked on. Nirmala Sitharaman as Finance Minister, I mean, this is a surprise because look, she's held the Commerce Ministry previously, she's held the Defence portfolio previously. Look at Nitin Gadkari getting the MSME Ministry. That is a big surprise. I mean, that you know, from being one of the stalwarts of the BJP, holding some of the key portfolios, Nitin Gadkari being given the MSME Ministry is an even bigger surprise than Nirmala Sitharaman getting the finance portfolio. Rajnath Singh has been appointed the defense minister, but just to go back to Nirmala Sitharaman being appointed the finance minister, you know, she's been she's a Rajya Sabha MP. She has held two portfolios previously, but to get the second most important position in government, I mean, this is a massive elevation for Nirmala Sitharaman. There is absolutely no two ways about that. Narendra Singh Tomar has gotten agriculture and Panchayati Raj. He held that portfolio previously as well. You know, I keep saying this, that this government's ability, this Prime Minister's ability to surprise, you know, you cannot take away from that. And look at what is flashing on your screens. So Nitin Gadkari holds on to roads, highways. He's also got the MSME Ministry.
Piyush Goyal, I just want to add, Minister of Railways and Minister of Commerce and Industry.
Okay.
Shireen, I think the market's slightly disappointed because the finance minister post is something that the market thought would either be Amit Shah or Piyush Goyal. But of course, Nirmala Sitharaman, you know, has proven herself in various ministries. But
I mean, without a doubt, this is a massive elevation for Nirmala Sitharaman.
Actually, Nirmala Sitharaman has been the one person who has been promoted the most over the last 2 years. Her rise through the ranks as a party spokesperson to minister and now to get the second most important ministry. I think it's just a miraculous rise that we see.
Absolutely. I mean, no two ways about that. This is a big move up there. Piyush Goyal, let's just bring that up for you. So he's getting two portfolios, he's getting railways and he's getting additional charge of the Commerce Ministry as well. Ravi Shankar Prasad continues as Law Minister, Sadanand Gowda as Chemicals and Fertilizers, S. Jai Shankar, this was the speculation and it has now been confirmed, the former Foreign Secretary is going to take over the Ministry of External Affairs. So that is very clear. Smriti Irani, Women and Child Welfare, so that is the portfolio that is being given to Smriti Irani. Ramvilas Paswan gets Consumer Affairs, but you know, perhaps we should try and bring in reactions. And I did speak with Manish Chokhani on the possibility of Nirmala Sitharaman getting the finance portfolio.
What did he say?
And I think, you know, the case that was building for Amit Shah in the finance ministry was that, look, he's a man with stature, enjoys so much political capital, that the assumption was that even if it were tough decisions, they would be moved faster. But you know, you cannot take away from the fact that Nirmala Sitharaman has you know, delivered in two previous ministries, but also the fact that clearly the PMO's stamp is now going to be even more visible on the finance ministry. So I think that is also something that that we will have to take stock of.
There is a bit of disappointment on the Bank Nifty though. It's down about 200 odd points, but we are getting some reactions. So let's go to them quickly. Saurabh Mukherjee joins in. Saurabh, well, Nirmala Sitharaman from JNU to becoming the first full-time woman defense minister and now the finance minister. Your initial reaction?
So look, I mean, a big day for the market, in the sense that this is a sea change from what we have been accustomed to. Also, big day for women in India. I think, if I'm not mistaken, this is India's first female finance minister. So I think a major milestone in that regard. My reckoning is there'll be a great deal of continuity in the finance ministry. The Modi government has been, will be centrally led by a strong leader. And in that regard, I think Nirmala Sitharaman will execute the policies that have been laid out so far. I don't think there'll be major policy surprises. The finance minister will have her in tray full with dealing with the NBFC crisis and the issues in the short-term money market, and then very shortly thereafter a tricky budget. So, congratulations to her. For a hard-working politician, this is just rewards, and we will wish her the best with her tenure. But big milestone for women in our country.
Oh yes, absolutely. That point cannot be taken away, and that's a big talking point for Nirmala Sitharaman. The market, well, it's now stabilizing actually. It's now in fact even recovering from the lowest point. The Nifty is now down only about 15 points. We have Ajay Srivastava also now joining us. Ajay, good afternoon. So your thoughts? The market was sort of factoring in Amit Shah as finance minister, but do you think it will be disappointed with Nirmala Sitharaman, or it'll be fine?
No, I think, as I think the predecessor was saying, that, I don't think there'll be a change of policy direction. That's one. Number two is, it's always good to have a new person there, so we must wish her all the best to at least come into the place. Of course, the fact remains that, in her past job, whether in the Commerce Ministry and in the job with the Defense, lots of new initiatives could not take off fully, and that's a challenge she will face, to get lots of new things going in the finance ministry, plus a new portfolio altogether. So it's going to be challenging. I think it's not disappointing, but it's going to be challenging for the environment. It's going to be challenging for the minister as well. But we, as you said, we all wish the best that she comes in at a very tough time, and hope that we have a much better time than last year's.
Oh, yes, a very tough time indeed. She will be the second woman finance minister.
Indira Gandhi
held the portfolio of 71.
But was the Prime Minister.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I think Gautam Trivedi is also with us, so let's go across to him. Ajay, just stay on for a bit. Gautam, hi, good afternoon.
Hi.
It seems like the market is relieved now that this event has now is out of the way, and it's sort of getting a chance to move on. But how would you react to the various portfolios that have come through?
Yeah, I think specifically on the finance ministry's portfolio, which is the third most important portfolio after that of the Prime Minister and the Defense Minister, I think this seems to be a little bit of an odd choice. That's my first initial reaction. But again, I don't know enough about her to make that comment. What I do know when I went to Wikipedia is that she has a BA in economics. So I suspect that obviously is good news. At least she does understand the portfolio. And I suspect that she's got a good chemistry with the Prime Minister, given the problems that we have currently in the banking system. I suspect he needs somebody with whom he enjoys a good rapport. I suspect that's where she was picked.
I think this surprise perhaps partly explains the fall that we saw in the market about an hour back. Because the way it fell intraday, and that's why now it's a bit of a status quo, because the move had already happened. And now,
so now this explains that 1,000-point move that we saw, especially on the Nifty bank.
Because the market was pricing in Amit Shah as the finance minister, and you had seen a big rally on the bank Nifty, and so just before that, the market fell 1,200 points. We were all scratching our head, whether it was program trading or whatever. I think now we have
clumsy fingers
a fair bit of answer of what actually happened.
I think you're right on that front. I think that the market had probably smelt that there is
going to be Amit Shah.
That it wasn't going to be Amit Shah.
I think Nirmala Sitharaman's name was mentioned yesterday by one of the news agencies.
I'm telling you, in the morning when I had that conversation with Manish, I asked him, because this was one of the outlier names being mentioned, that could it be Nirmala Sitharaman, and I did talk to Manish about that in the conversation that we had this morning. So I think a lot lot of continuity.
Especially because, she was among the first few to take oath.
Absolutely.
So it was very clear. It was visible, the hierarchy, the change in hierarchy was very visible yesterday.
Absolutely.
The way some ministers moving into the back and some ministers coming into the front. I think that was visible.
She was in the top 5 taking oaths.
Exactly.
So that was
and she has served as the Minister of State for Finance and Corporate Affairs under the Ministry of Finance. Yes. She was the Minister of Commerce and Industry with independent charge.
Yes, under Mr. Jaitley. Under Mr. Jaitley in 2014, she was the Minister of State for Finance, and then of course she moved to Commerce and then moved to Defence. Yeah, exactly. So she moved to Defence post that.
Okay, so Saurabh, now the event is done. Okay, Saurabh is not
Nilesh Shah
there.
is with us. Yeah.
Okay, Nilesh Shah is with us. Nilesh, hi, good afternoon. Ministries done, swearing in done. What next from the market's point of view?
Hi, good afternoon. Yeah, clearly I think the markets are going to be looking out for any kind of policy directions, the initial thoughts from the different ministers in terms of what their outlook is or what they intend to do or what the priorities are. So now I think we'll all be looking forward to the sound bites which come in from different members of the cabinet.
Okay.
Yes, we are hoping. It's been a long wait to get the portfolio allocation announcement, and now of course there is a cabinet meeting that will take place later this evening at 5, and our understanding is that perhaps the sound bites will start to happen post that. But in this first cabinet meeting, I think one of the things that they are going to probably take a decision on is the universalization of the PM Kisan scheme, so taking that forward. But it is going to be a fairly sort of challenging situation that Nirmala Sitharaman, as the new finance minister, walks into. You've got the GDP numbers coming in today. You do have, a slowdown on the consumption side. You continue to have problems on the NBFC side, the liquidity issues. So it is not going to be...
And the equation between the finance minister and RBI, I think
not just that,
is going to be
not
important.
just that. What is going to be even more important is the GST Council. I mean, Mr. Jaitley had the political gravitas and the authority, and so those are big shoes to fill into.
Exactly.
And Nirmala Sitharaman will have to work to take all the states on board and along.
That was the reason that Prime Minister was so keen on despite Mr. Jaitley's letter to have Mr. Jaitley in the cabinet because of his importance on all these issues, Shireen. So
absolutely.
Nilesh, I wanted your thoughts on how to approach the bank Nifty itself, because we've seen a mammoth rally in less than 20 days. It's more than a 10% rally that the bank index has seen. Big heavyweights, SBI contributing to that. Perhaps a lot of it was expecting some of these reforms, etc., to come through. But what next? Do you see more of an upside here?
Well, it looks like, I think the entire banking space still looks to be on a very, very strong kind of a wicket. I think in the very short term, what we'll have to really watch out for is what the RBI does next week in terms of policy rates and some of the other measures. And I think liquidity probably has been also away from the mid to the poor quality NBFCs into the banking space. So I think for now, the banking space still looks very, very strong. And I think given the fact that it has a very, very high weightage in the frontline indices, clearly it looks still for an upward journey. Of course, there could be still some volatility, but I think net, directionally, I still think the banking space looks very, very positive.
Nilesh, Harsh Vardhan is taking charge as the Minister for Health, and in the past he's been vocal about increasing the taxes on cigarettes. How would you view this, this move?
Yeah, I think clearly, irrespective of who the minister is out there, clearly I think that's the cigarettes has been the favorite whipping boy, and that's been a very, very large source of revenue. And clearly, I think pressures on revenue are still going to kind of be there. So it's not going to be surprising at all if in the coming budget the taxes on cigarettes are further hiked, and it's quite possible that taxes on some of the other sin products also get further hiked. So clearly I don't think there's going to be any challenges on that front or any resistance on that front, and that's going to be clearly the low-hanging fruit for the government.
Yeah, I just wanted to get in a word, Nilesh, on the infrastructure portfolios. There is continuity there because you have Mr. Nitin Gadkari continuing to hold on to roads, highways. He's also now been given the MSME ministry. I was just wondering, guys, has anyone had a look at who gets civil aviation? Do we have a name there? And also power. I think there is a change in the power ministry. I'm not sure if R.K. Singh retains power. I know he's got renewable energy, but I just wanted to double check on him holding on to power. But on Nitin Gadkari holding on to roads, highways and getting MSME.
Yeah, clearly, I think that's clearly been a very, very positive in terms of the cabinet composition, in the sense that it's a signal towards continuity, and Therefore, the entire roads build-up program is going to kind of sustain the impetus. But clearly, the big area to watch out for, especially in terms of this portfolio, is going to be the river linking project. That essentially has been in the works for a very, very long time. And I think clearly in this term, we would all want to look forward to a very, very strong and an expedited execution on the river linking front. And that's a very, very massive program and can be provide a huge fillip to the entire infrastructure piece in India.
I just want to add,
just mentioning Hardeep Singh Puri has got civil aviation and Rajkumar Singh has got Ministry of Power.
So he holds on to the power ministry.
Also, the Minister of State in Finance, Anurag Thakur has got. I think last time we had two.
Yes, we did.
We had two junior finance ministers.
You might also find another.
No, I think there's only one. In the press release, there's only Anurag Thakur.
That's another unconventional choice there to have Anurag Thakur as the Minister of State for Finance.
Yes.
I have to say, as well as the Minister of State for Corporate Affairs. I think that is a
surprise. But just double checking. I think we have only one Minister of State in Finance now, not two like we had last time around. Last time around it was two, but this time it's only one. So. I don't know, even on the cigarette bit, how, whether...
But, they're also, just because we're also seeing a lot of people holding on to dual portfolios. We talked about Piyush Goyal, he gets railways and commerce. Even Hardeep Puri, Minister of State, independent charge of the Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs, so he retains that portfolio. Also, Minister of State, independent charge, Ministry of Civil Aviation, and the Minister of State in the Ministry of Commerce and Industry. I mean, Hardeep Puri has been given 3 portfolios. So this is which also means that there is perhaps the possibility of them expanding the Council of Ministers later, because it would be very, very difficult. These are big ministries for someone to hold on to 3 of these ministries. I don't know whether this means or signals that we could perhaps see an expansion at any point. Nilesh, your thoughts on that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it looks like that there is going to be one more round of expansion of the cabinet and the ministry, and I think at that point of time you could see a further reallocation of portfolios, especially in areas like railways, commerce. These are kind of very, very important portfolios. Clearly, from an economy point of view, these are extremely important portfolios, and I wouldn't be surprised if these portfolios are further allocated in the next round. And I clearly believe that while the position of the finance minister is very, very important, but I clearly believe that the commerce ministry is an equally important kind of a portfolio, because clearly industrial activity, manufacturing activity requires a very different level of focus, and I think it's now time for the government to really focus on this segment. And I think in that context, and of course global trade, international trade, and this is really where the Commerce Ministry plays an extremely important role. So I clearly believe that probably the Commerce Ministry is something which requires a very different focus, and it requires probably somebody who's extremely full-time on that. And that, I think, is the space to really look forward to in terms of that in the second round, is there a separate dedicated minister for the commerce?
Oh yes, that's something to watch out for. Also, Rima, before that, Shrin Dharmendra Pradhan is now Minister of Petroleum and Natural Gas and Minister of Steel as well. So, and he's now full-fledged cabinet minister as well. So I think it's a bit of a promotion for him as well. In terms of the hierarchy. So he is also clearly moving up.
He had oil and gas, and he had additional charge of skills previously.
Yes.
So now he's retaining oil and gas and getting
steel as well.
The steel
and
ministry.
And railways has gone to Angadi Channabasappa. So
but it's Piyush Goyal
along with him, Minister of State.
Actually, I want to also, as we've been discussing, water is going to be a big theme, because a separate ministry for Jal Shakti has been formed, and the cabinet minister for Jal Shakti is going to be Shri Gajendra Singh Shekhawat.
No, but there's always been a water ministry, so So Gajendra Shekhawat, the buzz was that he would get the agriculture ministry, but since agriculture has gone to Narendra Tomar along with Panchayati Raj, then I guess this is the water ministry is going to the others.
All right, so in case you've joined in late, the big portfolios have come through. Amit Shah has been appointed as the Home Minister, and Nirmala Sitharaman has been appointed as the Finance Minister. S. Jayashankar appointed as the External Affairs Minister. Rajnath Singh has gotten Defence, so he's appointed as the Defence Minister. Soumya Kanti Ghosh of State Bank of India joins in to give us his quick take. Soumya, good afternoon. It's come in as a bit of a surprise, Nirmala Sitharaman as Finance Minister. But your initial thoughts, and would this have any economic implications at all?
One second.
Go ahead.
No, I think there is a surprise, of course, in the portfolio allocation, but I think the priorities are well laid out in terms of what needs to be done. For example, finance, what needs to be done in terms of the trade, and of course, in terms of the trying to give.
Oops, okay, I think we did snap that line. But for now, the market, Anuj, is, it's flattened out. So after that initial knee-jerk reaction that we saw, I think it's moved on.
I think the market had moved on already. The move had happened. Let's be very clear about it. The move had happened at 12 o'clock. We were all scratching our heads what was happening there. That was market, all the position. Now, for right or wrong, you could argue whether Amit Shah is going to be a better finance minister or Nirmala Sitharaman. That proof of pudding is in the eating. But the market had positioned itself for Amit Shah as finance minister, and I think that positioning got light 1 hour back, and after that the market never revisited those lows and is now inching higher. So I think Sonia, it's going to be very volatile. The next 2.5 hours, trust me, will be very volatile, but suffice to say that perhaps the low and high of the day has been made, and then of course now the market will talk about the challenges of finance minister, union budget, and
so we do have that cabinet meeting also later in the evening at 5 o'clock. I think Soumya Kanti is back with us. Okay, let's go to him. Soumya, we had got you on a scratchy line, but go ahead. You were telling us your reaction to Nirmala Sitharaman as the finance minister.
No, I think that's a surprise in terms of the market, but the priorities are well laid out in terms of what has to be done for the economy in the coming days. The growth rate has been a little down. The numbers will be out today afternoon. So I think the priorities are given, and from that point of view, what is most important is now the execution and what is the fiscal roadmap for the next 3 to 4 years. So the market would like to know more about that fiscal roadmap, whether the government could actually do something to lift the economy out of the demand slowdown which is facing, and of course what the government does for the rural sector. So these are some of the priorities well laid out, and also the fiscal numbers will be out today. So in the afternoon when the cabinet meeting will be held, the fiscal numbers for the last year will be out. So it remains to be seen what is the fiscal deficit which the government has attained. So based on that number, I think the priorities for the fiscal should be clearly laid out by the new finance minister in her budget.
Before we get to the priorities for the next finance minister, so Soumya, we've got the GDP numbers coming in today as well. What's the case that you're working with?
Actually, we are expecting that the GVA growth could slip below 6%, and GDP could just about retain at 6 to 6.1%. So it could be a little bit of, the numbers will not be a little bit of disappointment as far as the GDP numbers are concerned.
Banking is one sector that saw major changes after the NDA government came to power, Soumya. Whether it was the Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code, to the Monetary Policy Committee, to the Jan Dhan Yojana. It's sort of radically changed how India did primitive banking. What do you think the first 2 or 3 steps would be as the new finance minister takes charge?
No, I think the first thing is that you need to rev up the IBC infrastructure, because that is one area where where there is a lot of the cases which are still being unresolved because purely for the lack of infrastructure. That's the first thing the government needs to do. And the second thing is obviously the consolidation, which is high on the government agenda. And the other thing, which could be a little bit long-term in nature, is actually trying to look into the government ownership in the banks, and also the fact that some of the reforms like the areas in HR, which the banks have been now asking for a long time. So these are, some of them are short-term and some of them could actually be a purely long-term. And remember, there is also one more initiative with the government, which current government has laid out, which could be also run through banks, is basically providing piped water to every people in the country. So that's one thing which the government could actually also roll out very quickly.
Yes, that is something that they could look at rolling out. But just back again, Soumya, to, there is a large element of continuity also which has driven the decisions for portfolio allocation, especially if you look at some of the key infrastructure ministries. Piyush Goyal holds on to railway, gets additional charge of commerce. Nitin Gadkari holds on to roads and highways, gets additional charge of MSME. Civil aviation, of course, you have Hardeep Puri coming in as the civil aviation minister. R.K. Singh also holds on to the power ministry. So what do you believe that the fact that there will be continuity in some of these key economic ministries, what does that mean?
No, of course, I think the decisions which the government has taken in the last couple of years, I think, and given the fact that most of the ministers have been written with some new faces, so that will imply that the policy continuity, the emphasis which the government has given on social inclusion and also on the fact that fiscal consolidation and the other things. So I do hope that this continuity will not be broken, and we can expect that the social initiatives the government has been doing, I think there could be level 2 of that, actually taking it further down the road in terms of this Ujjwala scheme, the power scheme, and also the water scheme. So this could actually, there is now an element of, there is now an evidence that this could have actually changed some of the lives in the rural areas. So that will be on the government agenda, and hopefully the banks could be one of the ways where these schemes could actually be run.
Okay, so you did speak about the banking schemes that you would expect to hear from the new finance minister. But you know, the immediate stress point for the government is the way growth has slowed down, right? I mean, in the last 3 years, GDP has gone from 8.1% to 6.9%. And across the segments, whether it's durables, autos, FMCG, we've seen a big slowdown. A, what are you expecting from the numbers later today, the GDP numbers? And B, what do you think the government could immediately do to sort of target this issue?
See, I think now what's happening is that if you actually look at the global economy, I think there now the movement towards an imminent global slowdown is now looking more apparent, because the way the US yields have been moving, they have moved now closer to 2%. The oil prices are now almost at 65. So the way that prices are moving, that indicates, and the numbers which are coming out from the US are not actually great. And the trade war is taking a huge toll now on the US and also China. So if I take all these factors into account, and given the numbers of fiscal today, I am expecting a number around 3.5%. I don't know whether they have made 3.4%. If they have made, that would be so severe, that should be through expenditure cuts. So the question is whether the government wants to take the fiscal consolidation roadmap aggressively from year one itself, or it goes down progressively as growth comes back into the system. So that is the decision which the government needs to take. And my sense is that there could be some element of a roadmap which could be laid out in the budget, and whether the government stays at the same level of deficit which they've had this year, or it goes down a little bit every year, that I think should be the main point of discussion in the budget. But for me, I think some amount of spending is now required, because if the deficit is at 3.4%, there has been a severe expenditure cut as we are expecting.
Okay, Shireen, Human Resource Development Minister is going to Ramesh Pokhriyal Nishank. He's a former Uttarakhand Chief Minister,
right?
And former he was with RSS as well earlier. Right. So I think that's going to be, in this tenure, that's going to be another important ministry, HRD ministry.
It is going to be an important ministry, and I think, a lot of the people that we spoke with yesterday, for instance, people who have been dealing with the education space, were very, very vocal about the fact that Prakash Javadekar needs to retain HRD, because, he was making progress there, and that was the view. In fact, I think we do have Anil Swarup, the former Education Secretary and the former Coal Secretary, with us. Mr. Swarup, thanks very much. This government's ability to continue to surprise, that feat has been achieved even today. Let me start by asking you about what you make of the announcement. Nirmala Sitharaman as Finance Minister and Amit Shah is Home Minister.
I think Nirmala Sitharaman brings with her a lot of experience. She's worked in the Commerce Ministry, she's worked in the Defense Ministry. And I think she will be served well with her experience, and she should be able to do well as Finance Minister.
Let me ask you about what you make of, in the key economic portfolios, and I think you mentioned this last night when we spoke, that you would hope for continuity, and that seems to be the case, whether it's roads, highways. You've got Nitin Gadkari retaining that, R.K. Singh retaining power, Piyush Goyal retaining railways, Dharmendra Pradhan retaining oil and gas. So continuity, at least as far as some key economic ministries are concerned, and of course they've got additional charge of new ministries.
I'm very happy that this has happened, because whether it's infrastructure or social sector, in both cases, I think continuity, it requires a much long-term investment, both in terms of human resource and otherwise. So I'm so glad, especially Mr. Nitin Gadkari, who done so wonderfully well in the road sector. Almost everyone was appreciative of what he was doing, and I think he will be able to continue what he was doing earlier. So is the case with the other ministers. I think it's a very good decision to allow ministers to continue the ministries they were. I was a bit surprised when Mr. Javadekar got shifted because he was doing a phenomenal work in the Human Resource Development Ministry. But I'm sure he's going to do well wherever he is because he's a tremendous leader. He takes everyone along with him, and he now goes to Ministry of Environment and Forest, which is very critical and which he's handled earlier.
Yes.
So I'm sure he's going to do well. As far as Mr. Pokhriyal is concerned, I have known him for a very long time. Since early 90s, I remember when I was Director Information in government UP. He also has a background. He himself is a very accomplished writer. So, and he's been Chief Minister of Uttarakhand. And I'm sure he will carry on with the good work that Mr. Javadekar did because it will be very critical because some very good initiatives were taken by Mr. Javadekar, and I'm sure Mr. Pokhriyal is going to continue with those initiatives.
Okay. By the way, I just want to point out that the market is starting to fall now, so don't lose sight of that. The Nifty is now down about 0.5%. The Sensex is also falling down about 200 odd points. Suddenly, just pull up the Nifty intraday chart. Suddenly, in the last 5 minutes, you've seen a slide.
Yeah, mostly it's financials, Sonia. SBI is making fresh lows. Not the intraday lows, of course. Those were made at around 12 o'clock. But it's a bit of a decline, which is once again happening. So it's going to be very volatile. It's moved 300, 400 points in a matter of few minutes.
You know,
once again.
Mr. Swaroop and Nilesh, I just wanted to bring both of you back on the conversation around the finance. Around the finance ministry, Nirmala Sitharaman, finance minister. But what's also interesting is the choice for the Minister of State for Finance. Anurag Thakur, Mr. Swaroop, has been brought in as the Minister of State for Finance. I would imagine that this also does seem to signal that that the PMO is going to have a significant imprint on the Ministry of Finance.
I think PMO will continue to play a very critical role in the context of coordinating various ministries, as also finance. In the past 5 years also, PMO had played a critical role, and I have no reason to believe that it will not play any role now. It will continue to play that role, and given the nature of the job, I think that pivotal role is extremely, extremely important.
Mr. Swaroop, good afternoon. Arun Jaitley left a very strong legacy in the sense of a lot of things were done during his tenure in the last 5 years in the banking space, whether it was the Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code, MPC, Jan Dhan, etc. We were just speaking to an economist a while back who suggested that the need of the hour right now is perhaps a ramp up of the IBC infrastructure or even the government ownership of banks, etc. In your mind, what are the 2 or 3 top things that need to be done to solve some of the issues in the financial sector?
I spoke about it last evening when we were discussing this sector. I would believe there would be still some structural changes to be brought about. But I think most importantly is the initiatives that were taken by Mr. Jaitley. In fact, he's put in place certain institutions which have now to be made to deliver on the ground. I'm a great believer in making things happen. So when you talk about these NPAs and when you talk about the non-performing assets, as I said, someone will have to take them to the logical conclusion. So the disputes that are pending at various levels will need to be resolved. A final conclusion will have to be arrived at. I think the institutional framework is by and large there. Now someone has to get down and make things happen on the ground. I keep repeating this phrase, making things happen on the ground, which some of the economists don't understand because they're only discussing theory. For me, what matters is what happens on the ground. How do the businesses believe on the ground? How does the common man feel on the ground? That will happen if things happen on the ground. So, for example, we have this NCLTA, and in that case, if disputes are resolved and these stressed assets are cleared, things will start moving on the ground. Now, these structures have been created by Mr. Jaitley. Some of the finest steps that have been taken. Now, things have to happen, as I keep repeating, have to happen on the ground.
But, Mr. Swaroop, these steps are not going to help revive the weakening domestic consumption story and the weakening, domestic growth. What steps could the new finance minister take to revive that, especially in the 100-day agenda? See, as I keep saying, one thing is dependent on the other. It's not that everyone talks about liquidity crunch and the banks are not giving credit. We must understand if banks are not allowing credit flow, what is the reason behind it? Until we clearly understand the reason behind the inability of the banks to give credit, despite the fact that so much infusion has happened in past 1 year in the banks, there must be some reason behind it. Let's understand those reasons, settle them. For example, they are so apprehensive of the actions that are likely to be taken against them if anything goes wrong, that the banks are worried of
extending any credit. So these aspects can be taken care of by conveying signals of comfort to the banks. Then there are other issues I mentioned about the power sector. We have to look at the DISCOMs. Revival of Uday will in fact lead to a lot of generation of demand if these stressed assets are made to work, made to happen. And this can happen not by, infusing more money there. Here again, Uday, if actually, as I keep using this phrase, if there is real dawn of Uday, it will lead to impact in other sectors as well. Yeah. But we haven't done that. Let us look at what has happened in Gujarat. Gujarat has made, so to say, Uday happen. Why can't it happen elsewhere? So I can list out a number of measures that need to be taken for the revival of the economy. But immediately, I think the confidence of the businesses will need to be restored, by, as I said yesterday, by reviving the project monitoring group, by moving things on the ground.
Yes, absolutely. That is going to be key. Mr. Swaroop, always a pleasure, sir. Thanks very much for joining us.